Welcome to this video. Today I am on Amazon and I want to talk about the best Windows gaming PCs currently available on Amazon here in 2018. Now I did a video about this earlier in January, but now we're here in July, almost August, and so it's time to go ahead and do an update on that video because, as many of you know, the hardware is constantly changing and so are prices. Now please be aware, anything that I go over in this video, there will be links down below in the notes, down in the video description. So if you see something here that you want to check out or that you're interested in, please use the links down below. Now the first computer you see up on your screen right now, this is actually a computer that I bought and that I've done performance reviews of this computer on my channel. In fact, here is a playlist of all the games that I've done performance reviews on that computer. You can see I've done Fortnite, The Division, Ghost Recon Wildlands, Titanfall 2, Dark Souls 3, Grand Theft Auto 5. So there is a pretty good list here of games that you can check out on this playlist to see how they perform specifically on this computer. And please note that I just took this computer out of the box, plugged it in, and I've been using the out-of-the-box configuration when testing those games. I did add one SSD just because I needed more storage, but that does not change anything as far as the performance with those games. Now, basically with this computer, you get an i7-8700, which is 6 cores, 12 threads, 16 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM, and then you get GTX 1063 gigabyte card, a 120 gigabyte SSD. Now, some of you may look at that and be like, well, that's really small. It's the boot drive. And so, yes, you'll be installing your games on the 1 terabyte hard drive as well as some of your applications, but because this is the boot drive, the computer will start up and load much quicker than it would if it didn't have the SSD at all. So it's completely and totally worth it. And you can see right here, there are several reviews. They're not loading at the moment, but it does average 4.5 out of 5 stars for about $1,200. Again, as I've already said, prices do change. So if you look at this computer in the future, the price may vary just a little bit. Now that's option 1 that I wanted to go over. For option number 2, you can see that it's the exact same computer case, but we have 2 choices here. We have a $800 choice and a $750 choice. Now, one thing I did forget to point out with the first computer, the $1,200 one, this will play all current games on the market at 1080p resolution at an average of high detail and maintain above 60 frames per second, or average 60 frames per second. The same is with both these computers. They will both be 1080p computers that will average 60 frames per second or higher at an average of high detail settings. So basically it comes down to what's the difference between these 2 choices, the $800 computer or the $750 computer. So the $800 computer comes with a 120 gigabyte SSD, the boot drive. The one on the right does not. Additionally, another difference is the one on the left has a GTX 1060 for the graphics card. The one on the right has an RX 580. Now, to be clear, both of those graphics cards are in the same class, so you're really not going to notice performance-wise any difference between those 2 cards. Both of these computers only come with 8 gigs of system RAM, and I do strongly recommend that, especially for 2018, that you have at least 16 gigabytes of system RAM, because the games are going to play much, much better, much more fluently. So if we were to go with the computer on the left, the $800 computer, and add in 8 gigabytes of RAM, you're looking at about $879 total. And again, that's with today's current price. So if you're watching this in the future, that may be different. But right now, it would be $879. But I actually think that the $750 computer is the better option, and let me explain why. If I were to buy the computer on the right, the $750, I would also need to add 8 gigs of RAM to bump it up to 16. but it doesn't have an SSD, so I would want to add in an SSD as well. So this is what we're looking at here. I added in a 240 gigabyte SSD, so this SSD is twice as big as the $800 computer, as well as 8 gigs of RAM plus the computer itself, and so it comes to a total of 883. We're rounding, so 883. So let's take a look at those totals again. This one, 879 versus 883. So for $4 more with this computer, I got an SSD that's twice as big. So that's why I think that the $750 computer is the better option. And another thing I should make sure that you're aware of is twice this summer I've seen this $750 computer drop down to $700 flat, so $50 less, and I'm going to assume that it's probably going to happen again. And so if you keep your eye on it, you could get this price down even lower. If we subtract $50 off of that, you're actually paying closer to $834. So you come out way ahead. At that point, you could even go with a larger SSD if you wanted to. Now, just to be completely transparent, because you're adding in an SSD, you would also need a SATA cable because the computer's not going to come with one. So there's one right here. Again, I will link all of this down below in the notes down in the video description. You can see it's about $5 more. I should also note that if you don't have drive screws or a screwdriver, you would actually want a kit like this, and this is closer to $9. And if you don't have zip ties, you're going to need those as well because you have to zip tie the cables, and those come out to about $9. So depending on what you do and do not have, you're looking at anywhere from $5 to maybe $15 more to this price because we're adding an SSD. But I just want to make sure you know about that so you don't have any surprise fees. Now for option number 3, we can see it up here on the screen. This one is closer to $1,400, has the exact same computer case that we've been looking at the past couple computers. But let's go over the difference here. So this computer has a GTX 1070, and basically you want to buy this computer if you want to be able to play every single game, 1080p resolution, max ultra detail, and maintain well above 60 frames per second. Also, another thing, if you go with this computer, you're going to have less upgrades you're going to have to worry about because it already comes with 16 gigs of RAM. It already has a 240 gigabyte SSD as well as 2 terabyte hard drive. Really, the only upgrade that you would have to worry about possibly is with this processor. You can see we only have the Intel stock cooler, and I know from experience that this is going to run, especially when you're doing AAA games, it's going to run pretty hot. Ideally, when gaming, you want your CPU to be somewhere between the 60s and 70s degrees Celsius. It may pop up into the 80s once in a while, but ideally, especially with AAA games, you want to kind of keep it within that range. If you were to try to multitask, let's say you were playing a AAA game, plus you wanted to live stream it or record it or something like that, and actually take advantage of the full power of this CPU, it's going to have a hard time staying cool with just that cooler. So you may want to look at possibly putting in a liquid cooler. You could put a 120 millimeter liquid cooler on the rear, or on the front panel you could put a 240 to a 280 millimeter liquid cooler on the front panel as well. The only concern I have with that is this front panel kind of restricts airflow a little bit. So the performance of a liquid cooler on the front panel may be affected because of the restriction of airflow. That's not a huge issue. You do have an alternative though. If you're worried about that cooler, there is another option. If I go to this computer, you can see that it's a different case. It also has a GTX 1070. It's almost the exact same hardware. It just has 1 terabyte less as far as the hard drive. But the switch off is you get a liquid cooler. And so if we take a look at this, we can see that it's a 120 millimeter liquid cooler on that CPU. The case is also larger, and it also has a vent on the top, so it gives you a lot more options with cooling and airflow. And so that's maybe something to consider. But if you're only going to be playing games and just games by themselves, you still could go with this computer. All I'm saying is if you want to take full advantage of that CPU and push it to its full capacity, I don't think you're going to be able to do that with this little Intel stock cooler on this computer. Now going back to this page, again, as I've already said, I will link these all down below in the notes, down in the video description, but we also have some additional options, and this kind of takes us to the next category of options that I want to go over. So pretty much everything up until now has been a 1080p computer. The GTX 1070 will play a lot of games at 1440p, but moving into 2018, there are going to be some games that it's going to struggle with. You would have to bring down the detail level, detail settings to maintain above 60 frames per second. So if you want a true 1440p gaming computer for 2018 that will play at an average of high detail and maintain above 60 frames per second, you actually want this right here, the GTX 1070 Ti, or you may even want to consider a GTX 1080, one of these two options. If you're looking for a true 4K gaming computer, the only one you should be looking at is this one right here, the GTX 1080 Ti. You can see that, you know, there are price differences. This one also has a different case, and so you do have several options with those computers. But that's basically the computers I wanted to point out to go over to let you know what your options are. If you do have any comments or questions, please post them down below. We can start a discussion. Other people can chime in. Again, I will post all the links in the notes, so you don't have to go looking for this on Amazon. Just go down to the video description, click on the links. It'll take you directly to all of these pages that I've gone over. But as always, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you have a great day.